All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started here in just about 30 seconds. This is your 30-second countdown.
Places, everyone, places.
All right, I think that's close enough to 30 seconds here. I forgot to set a timer on my end. But welcome everybody to this month's seminar put on by Workforce Solutions here at Laurel Ridge Community College. We are excited to have you back with us this month. A great topic this time, hiring employees, the critical first steps to success. After this course, you will know how to define clear expectations and success measures, conduct more consistent, effective interviews, identify candidates who fit your organization's needs, and reduce hiring mistakes and turnover. I'm really excited for this, not just because of the topic, but because backed by popular demand is John Thalheimer. He is our host for today. He's going to walk us through all this. If you haven't heard John speak before, you're in for a treat. This guy is, what can't I say about him? He's a best-selling author, an award-winning consultant, podcaster, workshop facilitator, trainer, you name it. I could go on for the next 30 minutes, but I'd be cutting into John's time. All that to say, you are in for a real treat. It's not just the wealth of knowledge that he is, but it's also how he presents it in a very engaging and retainable way. So this will be recorded and sent out to everybody after the fact. With that being said, I will go ahead and turn this over to John.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for being here today. I appreciate you taking time out on this hot day to be here. And maybe that's the only reason you're here because you wanted to get into the air conditioning. I get it, right? It's there. This is a really important topic. In this presentation, I tried to bring in some stats about Virginia and what's going on in the Virginia economy. In terms of hiring and employment and all that kind of stuff, because I think it's going to be important to kind of think about where we are, because a lot of what we're hearing out nationwide may not be in our area as much, right? So we'll pull up some statistics as we go through that as well. The goal really here is to kind of think about what do I need to do to have great employees and how do I keep those employees around? And so part of that comes around into the decision making. How do we kind of bring that in there as well? And I wanted to start with this graphic. I'm not going to go into the whole graphic and kind of do it, but I really believe strongly that our success comes from the quality of our decisions, right? The success that we have in life comes from our ability to consistently make quality decisions. And so when we start thinking about our organization and we want individuals on our team to make quality decisions, we have to think about when we're hiring somebody, we're just not filling a position, right? And so a lot of times we'll be like, I need somebody. I talk to hiring managers and like, John, I need somebody tomorrow. What can you do? Get me somebody in here. I remember I was doing a workshop on hiring and HR and having conversations, and I asked somebody like, what's the most important thing you need of an employee? And they're like, and then maybe they were joking. I don't know. They were like, as long as they're breathing. And I laughed with everyone else in the room. We kind of laughed about it. And we said, oh, yeah, ha ha. But then I turned to them and I'm like, what's your turnover rate? Their turnover rate was 50% after 6 weeks because they were just hiring people. They weren't thinking about what we really needed and what the person was going to do the job, and they didn't really introduce the job really well. And so people got there, and the job, I have to say, wasn't the best job in the world. It was long shifts, not in the best environment. It was manufacturing, and so they were working in like 100-degree temperature out there. And so it wasn't the best job, but that wasn't why people were leaving. The reason people were leaving is they weren't hiring the right people. And so kind of making sure that you do that in there. And so when we're hiring somebody, this is a person that's going to be making decisions in your organizations on behalf of the organizations. And so getting those decisions right can be really important to make sure we do that. Okay, so just a reference to my book, The Best-Selling, The Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. This book is designed, if you have HR responsibilities in your organization, it's designed for you. And so kind of putting that in here. But I really wanted to start with this question. What's your biggest challenging in hiring right now? Tell me in the question box. I mean, the chat box, I should say. Tell me what's your biggest challenge right now, or you can shout it out. You guys all have microphones, I think. I think you have access to microphones. You can shout it out as well. Normally we wait to the end of the class to ask questions, but I thought we could start with the questions now. Oh, we have a quiet group today. All right. Well, we don't we'll keep putting them in there. If you have any questions as we're going through the class and the workshop and the webinar. Okay, William, thank you. Yeah, finding skilled labor, right? So we're going to talk about the difference between skilled labor and experienced labor. What's more important? Where do we start looking? We'll get into kind of some of that stuff. But if you do have questions as we're going through the materials, please don't hesitate to ask. Either shout it out, throw it in the chat box. Kind of making sure that we get all that kind of stuff is really important. Honestly, I just love having conversations with people. I did a webinar the other day for the Virginia Library Association around HR, and I think it was actually around hiring. I think it was. I don't remember. I've been doing so many of these. And the last 15, 20 minutes, we just had a conversation. And so that was really good in there as well. Often we need to hire a unicorn, someone you can do everything, hard to find. Yeah, right. And so when we have like, oh, we need them to do everything, that's a problem, right? Because we can't get everything, right? So kind of looking at that, finding the right blend of soft skills and digital fluency. Yeah, right. And so kind of looking at all those things. So we're going to look at that. All right. So this is our first stat for today for Virginia. In Virginia, employers are not choosing from an unlimited labor pool. So seasonally adjusted unemployment rate in Virginia is 3.8%. That was in May. So there's 169,800 unemployed Virginians. In the Winchester, Virginia, West Virginia metropolitan area, I guess you can call that a metropolitan area, 3.4%. So that's lower than the national average, which means that there is a limited amount of people that are looking for jobs in our area. Now, here's the thing. When you're thinking about, oh, I need to hire another employee, I can guarantee that that employee is working somewhere else. And so you have to think about, if I need to have that employee come work for me, I have to give them enough incentive to motivate them to make that move. And we know moving jobs is not necessarily a good thing, right? And so one of the things that we do know that's happening right now, because of the way the economy is, the way the things that are happening, is people are hesitant to move, right? They're hesitant to be like, oh, I'm going to take this new job because I don't know. They like the stability of their job. And even though they may not be happy there, they would rather stay there where they feel safe than take that kind of big move, right? And so just being aware of that. And so this means that our marketing efforts have to be stronger, the things we have to do. I remember the days you put out an ad and you would have 500 people apply for it. And I mean 500 real people, not just statistically in there. All right, so let's talk about AI. We have to talk about it, folks. We can't deny it. I know there's a lot of controversy. I've been kind of looking at all that kind of stuff, but there are ways AI can help us, and there are ways that we make sure that AI is not happening. Right? And so AI can help us with create and improve our content, organize information, generate questions, criteria, compare evidence against defined expectations. It can do all those things, and it kind of does some of that stuff really well. However, we need to make sure that we are the human, right? We are making the decision. AI is not a decision maker, should never be a decision maker. AI does have bias in it, right? AI has biases in many different ways, and we're finding in a lot of organizations, or a lot of states, a lot of government entities are looking at AI and defining what we can do in hiring. How can we use it in hiring? How can we use it in that process? And so you want to make sure as you use AI, right? As you use AI, that you are not discriminatory, not using it in a way that is hurting the protected classes, right? And so you want to be really careful about that. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to have little Alex join me. You'll see Alex. That's what Alex looks like up there in the left-hand corner. He can help, but he can't decide, right? And so kind of being aware that, yes, we spell Alex with a W to remind us that he is AI. So he'll pop up some as we go along, just kind of seeing those things. And so when we think about the employee, right, an employee timeline, it really starts with that job description, right? We're going to talk about the job description. We're going to get into that. We'll talk a little bit about the job posting, application review, interviews, background checks, hiring decision, final lot. Isn't an offer letter sent? We'll talk about all that, but know that there's more, right? There's a lot more that goes on with the employee timeline. We're not going to get to that today. We just don't have time. But being aware that what we do now impacts all that other stuff, right? And so doing this, setting people up for success, making sure that we're doing this well can be really important. So when we think about hiring somebody, we have to think about what is the work that needs to get done, right? And really, what are the expectations of that role? Because it's not like, oh, I have these 40 boxes I need to move. I need to move those boxes. I need to make sure that they're safe, that they're moved in a timely manner, that they're organized properly, right? And so it's not just the work. We have to think about that role and what do we expect from that role? What do we expect from a person in that role that's going to give them success, right? And so I'm always thinking about one of the things I will tell leaders, and I will tell you all, is spend time clarifying your expectations so you can be like, okay, this is what we want, right? And so when I look at expectations, there are 4 different levels, 4 elements of expectation clarity. Number 1 is, what are the desired results, right? What do I need them to do? What does success look like in this role? What are the objectives that I need them to achieve, right? So thinking about somebody in your organization or open role in your organization, what is it that I need them to achieve? What is the purpose of that? And then we get into defined responsibilities. And for me, going back to the decisions, what are the decisions that this individual is going to own in the workplace, right? And so if we have a front level employee, probably not going to own many decisions. They have to follow processes and procedures and standards, kind of make sure that they do that. We now have an executive, and that executive is going to own the clarity for his team, the direction for their team, making sure that we're networking and doing all those things, right? So it's going to be a different level, but you have to, if you're going to hire that person, have to really understand what those responsibilities are. And then, of course, there's the task, right? These are the things that they're going to do to make those first 2 things come true, making sure they accomplish that. And then the last thing is behavior norms. And so behavior norms really come from our values, right? And so you may have a value of respect and concern. And so you tell all your team members, you need to be respectful and you need to be concerned about your clients and your coworkers and the people that work around you. But you have to really describe to them what are the behaviors you expect, right? So taking that time to kind of go, okay, here's the behaviors, here it is. So like respecting concern means that you're going to ask coworkers if they need help. You're going to make sure that you are treating people with a high level of respect when they come into your organization, right? And so kind of looking at all those things. And so when we get clarity around expectations, we can make better decisions. That individual who's doing the role can make better decisions, but we can also make better decisions when we're hiring people, right? And so kind of looking at that to do that. And so once we've kind of understand the expectations, then we can start building the job description, right? And so the job description, obviously, title, purpose of the job, right? So what is the purpose of the job? If you have a role and you can't define the purpose, then get rid of that role, right? Unless it's your owner's great cousin on the third side, then you have to keep them, right? I get that. Experience and education levels, right? What are the experience you need? What are the education levels? Knowledge needed to do the job, right? What is the knowledge? What are the skills needed to do the job? And so looking at that and really understanding. So sometimes when I'm doing that expectation exercise, I'm thinking, oh, this is their task. So what skills do they need to do this task? What is the knowledge that they do, right? And so I'm gaining all that information so I can understand exactly what I'm looking for in an employee, right? So kind of looking at that. Work context. And so this is really my HR people. It's the ADA, right? And so the ADA says that we can't filter people out just because they have a disability, right? As long as they're qualified for the job, there. And so we have to really understand what qualified means. So yes, knowledge, skills, experience level, all of that. But you also have to understand, do they have to work in an environment where they need to stand for long periods of time? Stretch, reach above their heads, do the twist, see different in color, right? All of that work context is an essential part of that job description in there. Task the employee needs to do, right? So what are they going to do? What are they responsible for? Kind of that kind of stuff. The activities of the role, the tools and technology they're going to use, that has to be captured. And then we get into the Fair Labor Standard. That's a whole different conversation in terms of pay and how much they get paid and all that kind of stuff. But that's important too to kind of do that. Now, when we do these job descriptions, right? They are a critical, we call them foundational documents for our organization. And one of the things, after you've hired the employee, have them sign the job description after you've gone over with it, right? After they've gone over with it, because that way, if there's any question about their performance, they're like, I didn't know I needed to do that. You can always point back to the job description and say, look, it says it right here. You signed it. This is a reminder, right? And so kind of doing that in there. And so now we've got the job description. Oh, Alex has something to say. Alex says AI can help build or update your job description. Yes, AI is great at that. They can really help you with that. It is much better, though, if you do the work first, and then they can kind of look at it and kind of get it in there. There is a great website that I would urge you all to use when building job descriptions. It's called ONET, onet.org. ONET Online, that's what it is. onetonline.org, one word. So it's ONETONLINE.org. It is a great website, and definitely, so you can go in there and they have job descriptions for about any role you can think of. They also, they also have compensation information on there as well. So a great resource, definitely use it. We use that a lot in our work. And so here is a job description of the first 2 pages of a job description. This is a company down that I was working with, and I was building job descriptions for them, right? And so we went through and we got all their information, their task and responsibility, job requirements. And then I worked to kind of go through and make sure that these was what this organization needed. And so we spent, I think there was 25 different job descriptions for this organization. And then they had like 100 employees. So there was only, there was a lot of people doing duplicate roles. And so we just wanted to make sure we had all the right job descriptions in there. And so building that can be really good. So tell me in the chat box, what barriers are there keeping up? Well, let me ask you this. Let's change the question a little bit. My wisdom shares are because I love to have the people that are at the webinar kind of get in there and kind of do a lot more. And so when was the last time you updated your job descriptions? Let me know in the chat box. When was the last time you updated the job descriptions? You guys are shy today. Shy. Okay, looking at them now. Every time we have a job posted, yeah. Always when we post. Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good. I would recommend auditing these once a year, at least, because here's the thing that managers don't want you to know. We'll change your job. We'll change the description of the job without putting it in writing. And that gets people in trouble, right? And so being aware of that, it becomes really important, right? And so we want to be aware. We want to make sure that we're doing that and sharing some of that in there. All right, so how do we hire our best employees? What do we need to do? And so always be thinking about what is that position? What is that Rex role that you need to hire in there? All right, so what is the hiring process? We're going to go through all of these. I'll just kind of set the stage here. Defining the organizational need, right? What is the need? What do we need to do? Advertising, job postings, reviewing applications, resumes, looking at them. What are we doing? How are we doing that? Interview select candidates, right? So how do we do that? Which interview are we going to do? We're not going to interview everyone. Which ones of the candidates we're going to do? We're going to confirm their background. We're going to do reference checks, maybe background checks, maybe check their social media, and then we'll offer them the job. Simple as that. I don't know why people have problems with this, right? It's as simple as that. Okay, so another statistic. Virginia recently had more openings than unemployed people. So in December 2025, Virginia had approximately 210 job openings and 163,220 unemployed residents, about 1.3 openings for every unemployed person. Now, that is just this high level statistic. What it doesn't capture is how many people are looking for jobs in your particular industry, in your particular thing, right? And so sure, there's a lot of people out there looking for jobs, but they may not have the skill set. They may not want to work in your industry. They may not have even thought about working in your industry. And this is where your job is to make it enticing to think about, why should people come work for you? Why should they do that? And so knowing why you're hiring somebody, right? And so we kind of define that with those expectations, really clearly understand, why are you hiring somebody? And then understanding, so we talked about the job description, the expectations. The other thing you have to think about is what's the team characteristics, the team culture that you're hiring for, right? Because you don't want to bring somebody in that's not going to be so let me give you an example. I worked for a company and it was all about adaptability, flexibility, right? And so if you had to be able to deal with change really well, and if you didn't, you just didn't survive in the organization, right? Because the organization was always pivoting and changing and moving. It was just kind of crazy. And then I've worked with companies that are all about stability and processes and following procedures. Those are two different characteristics, two different attitudes. And you have to think about which one is right for me, which one is the right for the organization. So really thinking about those team characteristics and think about that. Okay, so once you've kind of understand that, now you have to answer this question, right? You're going to do a job posting. Your job posting is a mini marketing campaign about the goodness of your company. The only purpose it serves is to get people to apply for your job, right? It's kind of like the resume. The only purpose of a resume is to get the interview. The only reason to do the job posting is to get people to apply for the job. And so really you're answering this question, why should I work for you? Right? And there's a great book called Why Should I Work for You in 7 Words or Less? And in really thinking about that and kind of going, why should I do that? Right. And so thinking about this. And so a lot of times when I ask people, like, why should I work for your company? People will say, oh, great benefits or great pay. You know what? If I go to another career board, everyone says that, right? And I'm not saying you should put that in your posting, but that may not be your lead, right? Your lead may be the hours that are available, or that you're working in the music industry, or you're high tech, or you're growing, right? And because those are what people are looking for to kind of make that happen, right? And so kind of thinking about that. So once you start thinking about your messaging, you have to think about, who's my audience for that message, right? What type of person is going to be interested in working here? Because you have to think about, all right, I have a job posting. If this person is interested in it, where should I post it? Right. And so you think about this, right? If I have a professional level job, executive level job, I'm probably going to go to LinkedIn and Ladders and maybe some of those other big sets, right? Indeed. But if I have a entry level cashier restaurant job, probably not going to be looking in LinkedIn and Indeed for those type of jobs, right? And so where am I going to post that? Where am I going to do? And so kind of thinking about, okay, I have to have a clear message that comes across, and then think about, where are they going to be looking for that job? Because all of it, right? Again, talk to your marketing people and your communication people. All of this should be directed as a way to get people to kind of look at it, right? And so kind of doing that. Now, my last question on that slide is, why shouldn't I apply? And so I was doing this work for a organization, and they hired people to help in train yards, right? And so think about that, right? They're out all parts of the year, hot, cold. They work really hard, long hours. And so the pay was really good. And the entry was pretty easy, right? The entry level was pretty easy. You didn't need, I think you needed a high school diploma. That was it. And so pretty easy entry in this with a high pay. But here's the thing they said on their job postings. It said, this job is not for everyone. Because they didn't want people just signing up, right? And so sometimes you have to think about who who do you really want and who don't you want to apply, right? And so maybe put some of that in your job posting, like don't apply if you can't be flexible with your hours, or don't, right? Because then you can kind of feed people out, right? And kind of do that before they even apply, right? And so kind of looking at that and thinking through can be a really powerful question. And don't discriminate, right? So there's a couple things. Obviously, you know not to be like males only need apply. But we see advertisements all the time that say things like, oh, a recent college grad. Well, that goes to age discrimination and can get people in trouble, get your organization in trouble. So think about the wording, making sure that you're doing that across the board. So what can AI help you with? They can convert your job description to job posting. They can do that really well. It is something that I would think that would be one of the stronger things that they can do. Again, you want to look at it, you want to review it. You're the decision maker. You're the one releasing it. You can't go back. Oh, well, AI did that. You're responsible. Your company is liable for that. Okay, so where do we place our job? Where do we do it? Again, we're going to do it where we think our candidates are going to be looking. And if you're not sure, ask your recent hires. Where did you look? Where were you looking? Now, social media is great, right? For some people, you may want to use TikTok because that's there. If you're looking for younger, young Generation Z, maybe a few millennials, go to TikTok. That's where they are. If you're looking for Gen X, go to Facebook or LinkedIn, right? And kind of looking at that, that's where they're doing it. So think about, where are those people looking on their internet sites, Indeed, CareerBuilder, ZipRecruiter, Craigslist, etc. Nonprofit sites. So if you're in the nonprofit world, there's some great sites, and you can get industry specific sites. And so put it there. Really good. A lot of times when somebody's looking, they're getting a recommendation from somebody. Hey, have you looked on this job posting? It's really good for our industry, our profession. There's old media. If you got a lot of money, radio is a great way to go. There's still a lot of people who listen to radio, newspapers, television. There's opportunities out there. You can do temp to hire. Professional recruiters work. Again, I would say you want to be careful when you're looking at professional recruiters, because you want to make sure that recruiter has your expertise, right? And so somebody was talking about finding that unicorn. And so you go to a recruiter, and if they're not looking for unicorns, they're over there looking for zebras, they're not going to be any good. And so ask them and say, go give me some examples. Who did you hire for? That kind of stuff. Because every recruiter, if they're looking for work, they'll be like, oh yeah, we can do that. That's not a problem. Not the thing. I will say probably the best way to get it is through your connections, right? The best way to find new hires is through your connections. We know that most people that are hired through their connections. And so getting the word out, communicating to all your friends and family, like, hey, I'm looking for this. This is what I'm looking for. Here's what I need. Here's what I don't need. Right? And so getting that information out there can be really important to kind of make sure that we're doing that. Again, no discrimination, making sure that you're getting that out there and well. AI can help, right? They can help you decide where you will get your best return on your investment. Like, hey, it's going to cost me this much, that kind of stuff. So you can ask those questions, right? AI can help you with that now. All right, so now let's say we've got all these applicants coming in. Woohoo, it's exciting. You want to kind of go through this and create 3 piles, right? You're going to create one that says, no, they do not meet the job requirements as listed on the job description. Yeah, they meet those job requirements. Hey, I'm not sure, right? And so typically what I say, if you have enough yeses, then don't worry about the no's and maybes, right? Then you can just dismiss them and go, okay, great. Right? But you are wanting to think through this and go, okay. And I will say that this is probably the best way I can help you, is put your job description in there and go, okay, here's all the resumes that came in. Give me some thoughts and tell me what's doing well, what's not doing well, what's kind of getting in there, right? So you can use that in there as a way to help you out. Again, making sure that it's not biased, making sure that it's not doing things. And so being really careful in the beginning. We host the podcast, the HR Stories podcast, and we were talking about this, and I was very clear that it's a great way to do it, but in the beginning, you have to make sure that it's not being biased, right? Because it'll just, the problem with AI, one of the problems with AI is that it's really fast and it multiplies our mistakes, right? And so if we are being biased, then it just multiplies it in there, right? And so kind of looking at that and go, okay, what can I do? And how can I do that? Being really careful in there becomes important. All right, another stats, small businesses. I know we got a bunch of them in the room today, small businesses. In June of 2026, 62% of small business owners reporting hiring or trying to hire. Among all respondents, 51 reported fewer no qualified applicants, right? We've talked about that, including 24% who received no qualified applicants for their openings. Meaning it's hard out there, right? And it's hard. What do we do? How do we look at this? How do we get across that? How do we make sure that? So part of it's that job advertising, making sure that we're posting it well in the right places and getting there. But I also want to change our mentality. A lot of times we spend thinking about, I'm going to hire for experience. I want to be like, oh, hiring for experience. We're going to look at their job title. We're going to be like, oh, they've done this job before. Here's the thing that I know in my life experience is somebody, just because they did the job somewhere else, doesn't mean they do it to the level that we want them to do. And so, yeah, it's great that they've done the job before, but I want to know, did they have the experiences that kind? Think of a cook, right? Think of a sous chef. Now, I could have a sous chef that was a sous chef at a Denny's restaurant. And I can have a sous chef that was a sous chef at a Michelin star restaurant. And I want to hire the best. Well, I'm probably going to hire that person from the Michelin restaurant, right? If I can afford them, I'm gonna do that, right? And so being aware of that, right? And so we really focus on hiring for experience. We're focusing on job titles, industry experience, organizations there. Here's the risk, right? Experience tells you where someone worked, not necessarily what they can do well. Right. And so that's the problem with hiring for experience. And I am a big believer in hiring for skill sets. It's harder. It makes managers work. It makes us work because we have to understand what actually this person is going to be doing in the workplace, right? What does this role actually require? What is the skill set? What's the knowledge? Because what we're finding is a lot of times there are candidates out there that don't think about applying for our job because they don't understand that their skill set applies to this workplace. We find this in the military. When people have gone into the military service and they're leaving military service, they'll come out and they're not sure how their skill set transfers into the workplace. But when I talk to them, I'm like, look, you got teamwork. You've learned new skills. So you're good at learning. You're good at teamwork. You know how to lead people, right? All of those things are really important. Sure, you don't have the industry expertise that I need, but boy, I can teach that. I can train that as long as you have these other skills, right? And so looking on decision-making ability, right? Can they make great decisions in the moment if I give them the right information? Can they solve problems? Can they communicate and collaborate? Learning agility, technical and function capabilities. Skill shows, right? Skill shows how someone will perform in your environment, not just where they've been. And so obviously when we get into the hiring part, we have to test for their skills and kind of make sure they do that. But it does open up avenues. And there's this one avenue that I would ask you to consider is the second choice employees or second chance employees. These individuals that maybe have something on their record that normally you're like, I don't know. But looking at their skill set and go, do they have the skill set? They may not have the experience, but do they have the skill set? Can they actually do the job? And they may have it, right? And so kind of looking at that. The other thing that I would say about hiring, when you're looking for people, if you are in a technical construction, HVAC, community colleges are a great place to look for sure. Technical schools are also a great place to look. And so, one of the things you can do is get a relationship with those individuals in the school and say, look, I'm always looking for people. How can I support the school? So I have first dibs. I have somebody that runs the sales program at a university. So he's in charge of the sales training and teaching. And so he works with businesses to sponsor conventions, sponsor workshops, and that kind of stuff. And so those people that are sponsors get to meet the students even before they're on the job market and get that connection. And then you're building that and getting in there and kind of doing it. Okay, so now we have the resumes. We've selected a few people to interview. The interviews are our chance to better understand who that candidate is and if they can meet our expectations, right? Can they do that? Can they meet our expectations? And so to do this well, I'm going to put all these up there. To do this well, you have to know what the expectations are. And if I'm working as your HR person, your HR rep, your HR contractor, I'm going to go to you or your hiring manager and I'm going to go, okay, tell me the 7 characteristics that make somebody successful in this role. Right? And we're going to define those. What does that look like? What are they? What are the behaviors like that? And then I'm going to build 3 to 5 behavioral or situational questions to help me understand what their level of expertise is, right? What is their level of expertise in that? And so one of the things that I used to do as an interviewer, I would get my list of questions. I was so proud. I'd have my list of questions, right? And I would be like, I would ask the questions. As soon as they answered, I would move on to the next question. I was interviewing with one of my coworkers at the time, Tiffany, and Tiffany would ask follow-up questions. Never dawned on me to ask follow-up questions. But what we found, and by doing that, and now I do it all the time, is we get to the heart of the matter, right? Because I'm going to tell you right now, here's what's happening in the job market. Applicant gets, we want to interview you. So what do? They take your website, they take the job posting, they take their resume, and they send it into AI and say, what are the top 22 questions they're going to ask me, and how should I prepare my answers? And they're going to have the answers. They're going to be like, well, let me tell you about this, right? And so, but that's when those curious and follow-up questions really work, because now you're digging deeper, not where they've definitely not prepared. And so now you're starting to see, oh, what do they have, right? And so kind of doing that. So those behavioral and situation questions are things like, tell me a time, describe to me, give me an example, right? Those questions. The other things I do is create a scorecard, which is on page 67 of our book. I have that noted there. And so what we did was you take those characteristics and you put them in, and then you judge the employee, the candidate, on each one of those characteristics. What they have found, what the research has shown us, is that we make better decisions when we break it down by 7, 5, 7, 10 characteristics versus just kind of thinking overall. And we have the people that we hire are much better for our company for the long term. And so breaking that down, doing that scorecard, getting other people involved can be really important. Doing sample job tests. I think people are afraid of doing sample job tests, but you shouldn't be. They should be part of your interview process. And I'm not saying every last skill, but the ones that are really important, give them some kind of test. Ask them to do something so you can see that skill in action. The only caveat there is you can't do it so it benefits your organization. Like you can't interview a copywriter and say, hey, write copy for this, and then use that copy without paying them. But you can still do a sample. You can have them do it, just throw it away, right? And so kind of looking at that. I will say the one thing that I will, before I move on to the slide, is just being careful of our own bias. We all bring our own perspective, our own bias into the workplace. And so if that keeps coming up, and that's why I love having other people there, it really does help us kind of look at those things and be aware of that as well. AI can help you build questions, develop scorecards, suggest follow-up questions, and summarize notes, right? So kind of doing that. And so I will tell you my favorite interview questions as Alex comes in and jumps in there. My favorite question is, tell me a time your supervisor gave you constructive feedback and it was wrong. How did you handle it? Right? Because if they come back and they're like, oh, my boss was stupid and they were always wrong. And I had to tell them and I had to correct them. I'm not going to hire that person. I'm not hiring. Now, if they come back and go, well, it happened occasionally, but it wasn't a big deal. And we just talked about it. Okay, great. Right. And so kind of thinking about those questions and kind of doing that in there as well. One of the things we put in the book, and I really love this, is we put in the questions to avoid. Right? And so when we have our HR people and the HR people are in the room, they're like, whoa, 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 there's things you cannot ask because it can lead to discrimination. Do you have children? What's your marital status? How will your significant other feel about the amount of time traveling? Have you ever been arrested? What is your birthday? What church do you go to? Are you a citizen of the United States? What is your nationality? All of those will get you in trouble. And so drop them. And so what I love about having that in the book is that not only can you use it, but you can give it to those people that don't interview a lot. I always think direct reports if I'm having them involved, or peers, or new managers. This gives them there. We also have the top 30 questions we ask, right? So kind of in there as well. So now we have to think about, are they really who they say they are? How do we know, right? And so there's a couple things we can do, right? So great, it's interviewing, that kind of stuff. You can do reference checks. So reference checks are you calling the organization and say, hey, I want to know if this person worked here. Can you tell me when they worked there? Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with them? You can ask as many questions as you want. Now, if I'm your HR consultant, right, we're hanging out and I'm your HR consultant, and you're like, oh, we're getting people asking about references for our employees. I'm going to tell you to give them 3 pieces of information. This is the day they started, this is the day they ended, and this is the job they had when they left. That is it, because you want to protect your organization. When you start saying good things about somebody and not about somebody else, that could be seen as harassment or disparaging comments, or you make disparaging comments, you can get in trouble for that. You can get sued for that. Now, will people find out? Maybe. The risk may be small. But boy, I don't want to get in there. That doesn't mean you can't ask. Now, background checks, credit checks, drug testing. There is a law called the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and it says that we cannot do background checks, credit checks, or drug testing, which I think would be a little hard to do, but drug testing without approval of the person we're doing that on. And so you want to be really careful. So typically what I would do during the interview process, I'd be like, hey, this job, if it's true, right? Only if it's true, I said, this job is contingent on you passing a background check. Anything I need to know? And then I would give them our policy. Here's our background check policy. This is what it says. I have them sign it. I keep that piece of paper. So if there's any question, I have that documentation, right? So kind of doing that with credit reports. Now, always think about, if you're doing credit checks, you should only do it if it's necessary for that role, right? If I'm hiring a person in my warehouse, probably don't need to do credit checks on them. I might want to do a background check, but not a credit check, right? And so drug testing is the same way. You have to think about, what are you doing? What do you want to do as an organization? What's the right thing? Because you can do drug testing on application. You can do drug testing on suspicion. You can do drug testing on random drug testing, but you have to have that clearly. You have to do that. All right, so personality tests. Don't do it. That's my simple thing is don't do it. A lot of the normal personality tests that we're using in our workplace, like Myers-Briggs or DISC, and some other ones are not sanctioned or certified by the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, to use because they are not non-discriminatory, right? They can sometimes be discriminatory, and so you want to be careful. There are some out there. I've used the Judgment Index, the Predictive Index, that have been approved by the EEOC, but you want to make sure that if you're doing it, they've been approved used by the EEOC. So if you got a vendor going, hey, you should use this, you definitely want to do it. Now, social media screening, we want to be careful with. right? Because let's say we go and we have somebody that is interviewing for a job and their name is John Smith or Jennifer Jones, right? And we go and put that in there and 100 of them show up. We don't know if that is truly them. And so you could be making mistaken identity. Now, my name, John Tallheimer, there's not many Tallheimers in the nation. And so you can look me up, you're probably going to find out about me in there, right? And so, but just being aware of that is really important and thinking about that. So, yes, people do social media screening. It's public knowledge. So anything on their public out there, you can do. You can go to their LinkedIn profile. You can look at all that kind of stuff. But boy, do it with a grain of salt. Kind of do it and make sure that you're doing it in a way that's not going to get you in trouble for discrimination in there, right? So kind of being careful, making sure that we're not doing that as well. Okay, so let's talk about AI. Third-party companies, that doesn't sound right, are using AI, right? So third-party companies, I should say, are using AI, right? And so maybe you're having someone do background checks and they're using AI. Maybe you have somebody doing reference checks, they're using AI, or maybe you have some party using drug tests and somehow they're using AI. I'm not sure how, right? And so kind of going through that, you are still responsible. You, the company, still have liability, still rests with you. So if they're using it and it's discriminatory, there is a big lawsuit right now around Workday because of the AI models that they were using were discriminatory. And so not only is Workday being sued, but all the companies that have been using Workday, not all the companies, but a lot of the companies using Workday have also been sued as well. And what Workday has been saying is like, it's not our fault. We're just a software company. We have nothing to do with it. It's the company's fault. They're the ones. And so Workday is kind of, the courts have sort of said, no, you're responsible too, but be aware, right? There's going to be that liability on you. You want to be really careful with that. All right, decision time, right? And so again, we're going to take their application. We're going to take our interview notes. We're going to take our reference checks. We're going to take all that information and we're going to compare it to what we want. Do they meet the standards that we have? Will they be a long-time employee? A lot of times when I go to organizations and they're like, John, we have a turnover problem. Why do we have this turnover problem? I ask, are you hiring for longevity? And they're like, what? Gotta hire for longevity, right? And so kind of looking at that. And so thinking about, are they qualified for the job, the knowledge, the work team? Do they have all those things? All those things kind of really help you get there and kind of do that. And then we want to talk about the job offer letter, right? And so you may not do job offer letters. One of the things I would tell you to do on your job offer letter is put on the bottom of it that you're an employment at will company, which means that you can sever the relationship at any time for no reason. You can sever the relationship for no reason, with or without notice, right? And so you can kind of get in there as well. And so the offer letter is this formal document. It's really not meant to be a contract, but it's really just kind of outlining like, this is what we're offering you. We're offering you this salary. We're offering you this bonus. We're offering you this automobile allowance. We're offering you these benefits in there. And then if there's anything that's going to be contingent on a background check, pre-employment drug screening, review business references, put that in there, right? So make sure all of that is in there. Have them sign it. As soon as they sign it, then you can start treating them like an employee, kind of going through that and getting there on there. And so that, to me, is the hiring process. Now, here's the problem. How long does it take you to hire? So right now, according to SHRM's benchmark, a median time to fill is 39 calendar days for non-executive positions. And when you think about turnover cost, well, part of that cost is the hiring cost. And so right now it's costing about $6,000 to us to hire somebody, right? And so that's going to vary depending on where you are and what you're doing. But that's a lot of money when we're thinking about like, how do we address that? How do we deal with that? And so you have to make sure that you're hiring the right people and that they're there for longevity. And you really also have to think about that question on the bottom of the slide. How does your organization know when it's made a good hire? What point along the way are you saying, yeah, this was a good hiring, And can then you look back? Like, so one of the statistics that I would use in every organization I was with is I would say, okay, who was a good hire after 6 months? Who was a good hire after 1 year? Who was a good hire after 5 years? Right. And so then I would go back, okay, so what did we do during the hiring process that made us get that person as a good thing, right? Was there places that we were posting that made that better? Was there offers that we were doing? Did we give them an incentive? What questions did we ask during the interview? Because all of those things will help us going forward as well, right? So it's just having that dashboard of like, what are we doing? Kind of having those statistics can be really powerful in there. All right, I have that. What employment law questions do you have? But really, what any questions you have in there? We got about 9 minutes left in the webinar, so please ask your questions. Any questions you have, Diana? If you have any questions, Jay, Tanya, if you guys have any questions, throw them in there. Would love to hear questions. No question. You guys are a quiet group today. Maybe your keyboard's broke. Maybe you're like, I don't have any questions. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, Jay, come on back. Let's sum all this up for us. Oh, we got a question. How do non-HR people stay up to date with HR updates with employment regulation? Oh, good question, right? And so one of the things, and I talk about this a lot with my HR people, is that you have to stay up to date. So there's a lot of great newsletters can help. There's HR Dive. There is Ask HR. That's from Smart Brief. That's one of the ones I look at. And then if you have a third party doing your payroll, usually they'll have a lot of HR stuff. But it's really going out there, putting up searches in your Google search, and having announcements come through. HR is changing. Employment law, particularly, is changing a lot over the last probably 18 months. And so kind of paying attention to that becomes important. Thank you, Diana, for your question.
All right. Well, John, thank you very much for your time. I got to be honest with you. I'm not even in the hiring decisions in my department, and I have about 3 pages of notes I just took from the last 50 minutes. So, very insightful. Thank you very much. I can't believe it, but you somehow managed to raise the bar from last month's presentation to this month. So, thank you again for that, and thank you to everyone who joined us for the hour. Please feel free again. We are Workforce Solutions, corporate training team. Please feel free to reach out to us if we can help you with anything. Even if you have some suggestions for upcoming webinars you'd like to see, reach out to us. Let us know. Everyone will be receiving a follow-up email with today's recording. So once again, we thank you guys, and we look forward to seeing you next month as well. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.